All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to see such a great number of you joining us this morning. It's really exciting. Obviously, you can see on the screen, my name is Erin Yelland, and I am an associate professor at Kansas State University. And I also serve as the interim director of the Center on Aging here. I am a member of the North Central Region Aging Network and have been a part of that since 2016 when we first began. So I'm really excited that you all are joining and that our webinar series here has been so successful. So we're excited to see you. So today, let me go ahead and share my screen. Like I mentioned before, it's being a little funky. So I'm going to share this. So you'll see a little bit of that black, but it'll be fine. So today we're going to be talking about ageism in the workplace, which is a really big deal, especially as our workforce is rapidly aging. So yeah, I hope that you will get some great information out of this. My co-presenter, Amy, and I are going to have a few discussion questions for you. So we're hoping that you'll be active and engaged in conversation. We were able to present this or a different version of this internally to Kansas State University as part of a diversity and equity training. And it was a really great opportunity for folks to engage and have conversation. So I think you'll find the same thing. Okay. So I mentioned my co-presenter, Amy, Dr. Amy Fox. She's an assistant teaching professor here at K-State. You'll be hearing from her in just a minute. And we also want to recognize Katie Sigmund, who helped to design this PowerPoint and this presentation, but she was unable to join us today. And we're all coming from the Center on Aging here at K-State. So with that, we are so excited to have you. I hope you get a lot of great information out of this, and I will go ahead and pass it off to Amy.
Hey, great, thank you. So to start our discussion today, we wanted to highlight a few statistics that really emphasize the importance of studying not only aging, but ageism in the workforce, our topic today, and the work that we all do. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with these statistics, but currently approximately 17% of the population in the United States is over the age of 65. This equates to about 56 million adults. And this proportion of older adults in our population will continue to grow for the foreseeable future. It's predicted, you can see down at the bottom of the graph, that by 2060, nearly 1 in 4 adults, 1 in 4 Americans will be 65 years and older, which is almost 95 million older adults. And it's also predicted that by 2034, so not many years off, older adults age 65 and older will outnumber children under the age of 18. So we're seeing this big shift in our population. So one more thing that's not really represented on this graph, but in addition to our growing aging population, the number of older adults 85 and older is also growing exponentially. That number is expected to double by 2035. So going from approximately 6.5 million right now to 11.8 million, and nearly triple by 2060 to almost 20 million 85 plus older adults. So these demographic changes really, again, highlight the need for the work that we do, as well as the importance of preparing ourselves as individuals as we age, our families, and our communities for an aging population. So our next slide has one more graph. And this, it's a little hard to tell, but I'll kind of give you the rundown here, simply put. This represents the changes in the workforce over time and the percent change in different age groups of the workforce. So the number of middle-aged workers has remained fairly constant. It's changed a little bit over the past 20 years. You can see that on the right end of that graph, the older adults has increased over time, and much more so even the older population of 75 plus. So it's expected that by 2030, 20% of the workforce will be over the age of 60. And so that's a big shift in our workforce. And we're also seeing that it used to be that older workers were working part-time, not as much full-time, but we're seeing a shift as well as more older adults are continuing full-time work. So there's a lot of changes going on in our workforce and aging population. Obviously, there's a lot of different factors that drive these shifts, not the least of which being the economics of aging. So really all of this is to say is that our workforce is becoming more and more age diverse, and the prevalence of ageism and age discrimination in the workplace continues. So we do, as Erin mentioned, we want to chat kind of a few times throughout our presentation. And the first question we would like to ask you, and just kind of open it up for some discussion, is how have you seen or experienced yourself older employees being treated at your institution or workplace? This doesn't have to be negative, it can be positive. We're just looking for ways that you've seen older employees treated. Let's see, assumptions about tech savviness or lack thereof. Yeah, thanks, Jessica. That's a big one. As a resource, experience in the field. Sorry, I'm just reading some of these chats if you can't see them, but asked when you plan to retire. So this is a big one, and actually one of the reasons we wanted to do this presentation in the first place. I think in a minute, Erin will really, she makes a great point about kind of, especially during COVID, we've seen some policy changes and assumptions made that impact our older workers. We see older adults as a resource, their experience, institutional knowledge, being perceived as stuck in their ways and not up with the times. Had a couple of people being asked when they're planning to retire. Okay, and you're welcome to speak too. If you don't want to listen to me, just read. We're open to discussion here too. Okay, asking for advice on parenting and relationships. Seeing difficulties with DEI initiatives. Okay. So there's a even from just these responses, we see a wide range of both positive and kind of negative interactions based on age in the workplace. Having older volunteers, great resources, also frustrated with demands. Okay, yeah, so lots of great answers here. Thank you for all of those. Oh, one more, there's assuming that older employees might not be interested in promotion and not bothering to inform them of opportunities. These are great. Okay. Well, we will keep thinking about those, and we are going to focus now on kind of really digging into ageism and ageism in the workforce. So we'll kind of maybe come back to these two as we continue to chat. So I will turn it over to Erin.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your participation. A lot of really great examples there and things that we've heard at our own institution as well. So you guys aren't the only ones experiencing these things, and no one's living in a vacuum when it comes to ageism. So Ageism itself, we see it manifested and expressed in so many different ways. We know that ageism itself is just like any of the other isms and how those are carried out in society. So racism, sexism, all of those isms that we see. So ageism is falling within the same category as that. So how it is expressed, what does that look like? So we see 3 different areas and means of which we see ageism coming out. So first I'm going to start with the feeling. So starting with the individual itself. So some of these just implicit biases that we have. So those things that are sort of ingrained in our brains that many times we can't control. These are things that are embedded within our brains from the time that we're born and our early development. So a thought or a feeling there is that my older coworker is just taking away employment opportunities from younger workers who need it more. We see a lot of that in the workplace. And one example that I unfortunately have to share is with, and many of you and many of your institutions have implemented these things, but voluntary separation incentive programs, AKA early retirement. In our university, in a meeting, it was directly said that this was an opportunity to get rid of the dead weight. Verbatim, that was what was said regarding our voluntary separation incentive program or early retirement. So it seems that within that sort of process, there was a lot of feelings that were being expressed that this is just a way to get rid of those folks, save money, but then also hire younger people who are cheaper. And wrapped all around that is ageism, but we're justifying it through some sort of financial improvement or financial safety at the university. But really, when you take a step back and think about it, boy, that is ageism at its finest. We also see that then through discrimination or that outward action, saying that I'm not going to offer this professional development opportunity to an older employee because why would they need to learn that? We should save the space for younger people. Why should we include older people in brainstorming sessions or strategic planning because they're just going to be retiring in the next couple of years? Surely they haven't announced their retirement, but I'm sure they're going to be gone. And then those thoughts or those stereotypes. There's so many of these related to ageism. And I do want to be clear, this can go both ways. Stereotypes or ageism can go toward younger adults as well as older adults and even young kiddos and teenagers as well. But in this context, we have this example of older people are not as productive and can't learn new skills. So again, getting rid of the dead weight through these early retirement incentive programs, we are making the assumption that these folks aren't as productive and they have no worth and value to our institution. It's really such a concerning background reason or underlying rationale for why these types of programs exist. We also see, as Amy mentioned before, and some of you mentioned about learning new things and learning technology, some of our best resources at our university are older employees who have been here and they have the knowledge and wisdom and all of the expertise, and they know who to contact for every single question that you have. And I value those individuals and their experience and wisdom so, so much. And they are willing to learn new things. I don't know of a single employee here in our unit who isn't willing to go and learn new things, regardless of their age. And so I see that being completely different than what some of the assumptions are. And just because we're making an assumption, then obviously that's going to be limiting and restricting the opportunities that we're affording all of our individuals in the workplace. So what does this end up looking like? What are some of these myths? What are some of the realities, some of those stereotypes and thoughts and feelings that we have towards older workers? I found this picture on the left-hand side. Hopefully you can read it, but I will read it for you. Examples of ageism from older adults in the workplace. On the left, we see that this individual was treated like they were senile. The individual in the middle was passed over for being near retirement, and the one on the right was berated and called a waste of time. All of these individuals are very clearly experiencing ageism through these comments that were made. Some other older worker myths that are quite common in the workplace is that older workers are sick more often and they cost more to employ, when we know that that's actually completely false. And older adults themselves use fewer sick days and they actually have lower health costs. And part of that is that they don't have dependents. But really, older adults themselves are not these sick individuals who just need all of this time off and all of this healthcare and draining the system. That's not the case, and we need to squash those stereotypes. Also, that they have difficulty evaluating information and solving problems, when in fact, older adults have superior interpersonal and problem-solving skills. The thought that older adult workers are that dead weight that need to be chopped off because they have no value and that they are not as productive, when in fact older workers do have that workplace experience and have more focus as well. Then the last thing is that struggling to learn new skills. Technology has been a huge thing recently, or within the past couple of decades, because just so many new things are coming out and so many new opportunities or programs or things that we have access to now that we haven't previously had. And we just automatically make the assumption that these are things that only the younger workers can handle because older workers really struggle with technology. They're not able to learn it or not willing to learn it. When in fact, we know that these individuals are just as tech savvy as anyone else. So a couple of the ways that we see ageism being manifested, where does this ageism come from? And how do we personally express that? So we know that we have implicit ageism and explicit ageism. So if you've ever heard about implicit biases and explicit biases or unconscious biases, that's what we're talking about here in the context of ageism. So implicit ageism are those things that we think in our own selves and that we feel and experience. So for example, I once heard an older adult share a story about how, that they felt because they were old, they shouldn't be getting down on the ground to play with their grandchildren because, I'm just not going to be able to get back up. When in fact, the person was perfectly mobile, could get down on the ground and get back up as safely as possible. And because they were really just taking in that ageism, they thought, I'm too old. We hear these comments all the time, I'm too old to do that. I'm too old. And in reality, that's really just that mindset and that perception that you're giving yourself. So those are those things that we really are internalizing, and that can manifest in a variety of ways. And then we have that explicit ageism, and that's a lot of what we've been talking about thus far with ageism in the workplace, is how that is projected towards individuals and toward older adults. So what is actually that behavior, what's actually being expressed, that is that explicit ageism. And these two are very connected because our implicit ageism can really affect what we are expressing. But one thing, when I've given trainings or have talked with people about ageism and implicit biases before, it's in that middle part where we find intentionality. So we can have all of the implicit ageism in the world. We have these implicit and unconscious biases, but it's what we consciously do with those biases that then affects our explicit ageism. So we can be told that older adults have no value, that older adults can't hear, they're not mobile, they're terrible drivers, they can't do anything, can't learn new things. We can be told this all of our lives as children or even as adults. But as we start to be conscious of those biases and what society or what our family has been telling us, that's when we can enact that intentionality and really start to realize that I have these biases, but I really don't believe them. And I need to be conscious of how I'm actually expressing myself and how am I treating older people. And sometimes we're going to mess up. That's perfectly okay. That's perfectly normal. But what really matters is that we acknowledge and recognize and admit that we messed up. Really take the time to think about how we're interacting with older adults and then change how we interact with older adults moving forward and change what that explicit ageism looks like. So as you can imagine, we see ageism in a variety of ways throughout our lives. So we see that embodied ageism or more of that implicit ageism. And this is where we see that older adults and older women in particular should not have wrinkles. Older women who have long gray hair, well, that's just weird because you're supposed to have short hair when you're an older woman, right? And by God, the amount of money that is put into anti-aging regimens and creams and treatments and shots and Botox and all of that. It's insane. Why do we need these things? And I'm not saying that if that makes you more comfortable, more confident, whatever, 100% go and do that. But society is telling us that God forbid we have wrinkles, and look at the wrinkles on my forehead right now. I mean, oh, do I need to go get Botox? Society is telling me that I do. Then we have interpersonal ageism. So this is really our interactions with each other. This is talking down to older adults. This is calling them sweetie and honey and sweetheart and all of those things. Looking at older adults and their relationships and oh, how precious. People say to my children back when they were younger and cute and more well-behaved, oh, they were so cute when they were holding hands and just being precious. And now they're really fighting with each other a lot and getting into knockdown, drag out fights. But back in the day, they were so cute. And now we treat older adults just as we do kiddos, the relationship, so cute. Oh, look at them holding hands, so precious. That's called infantilization. And that's really where we're starting to treat older adults as if they were children. Then we see that institutionalized ageism, where you see that picture again, that people were treated in the workplace or in other institutionalized settings, that they were treated as senile, being passed over for opportunities. So this is really where we see ageism in the workplace. That's falling in that institutionalized setting. And then we have those structural and those cultural aspects of ageism as well. And you can see here in this Simpsons cartoon that an old man yells at a cloud because older people are senile and don't know what they're doing, and they all have dementia and nobody knows what's going on. This is how we see that enacted in some ways through media, for example. But we also see in just insane amount of ageism in policies and practices and laws and how people are treated in the justice system, just so many things. Recently, we had an individual here in town who is, I believe it was 78 or 79 years old and was having a mental health crisis. And it was on a pretty busy street in a main part of town. And just the ageism that came out on social media and just other people talking, it was this crazy old man. It just was really awful. And we hear a lot of more and more conversation coming out about mental health issues and getting people adequate mental health treatment. And I see that that's the conversation among younger people, but no one talked about this individual having a mental health crisis and the need for that individual to receive the adequate care that he deserved. So we see this playing out in so many different ways. Okay, so our next discussion question for you, and things that hopefully would be a meaningful exercise. So I was in a training before about racism, and this was a really profound question for me, because it was really said that it was asked, what would a world without racism look like? And many people couldn't answer the question because we just don't have that vision. We don't have a strong idea of what exactly that would look like. And we know that without a vision, it's really, what are we working toward? So to you, what would a workplace or a campus look like without ageism? So again, we encourage you to unmute and chat, or go ahead and type that in. Okay, I'm seeing some of your comments from before. Down south, the sweetie honey comments are pretty common. My mom used to hate being called dear or sweetie by healthcare providers. Ditto.
So this is Holly. I unmuted because I wanted to share that the last few doctor's appointments I had, I've been called dear. How you doing, dear? How you doing, sweetie? And I'm like, oh, I don't like that either. I know why my mom got mad.
Yeah, if I was called dear or sweetie at the doctor's office, make me very uncomfortable. Like, are you hitting on me, or what's going on?
And there's always hun.
On as well.
So
Okay.
sorry, are you able to look through the chat, Erin? I've been kind of
No, go
watching
ahead.
you zoom in. We've got, there's quite a few that say, older adults not being passed over for promotion, people of all ages working together, shared responsibility, older adults staying in the jobs that they love. Mutual respect and appreciation for all perspectives. Some value wisdom as a part of the bigger picture.
Because I'm down south and we have so many churches, I'm in the Bible Belt. I am really seeing ageism in churches. I'm seeing churches, my church in particular, where you're segregated by age. You never see the young people. The children are in their own wing. You don't interact with them. And we don't know each other. And then the young marrieds are separated in another building, and we never eat together. We don't know each other. It's sad.
And you make a great point. We'll actually, on our next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what the effects of all of this is, and that your kind of response.
Well, I became aware of this. I became aware of this when I went to my father's funeral, and he goes to a church where they do interact. And a young college student came up to me and said, I just want to tell you all the things your father has done for me, and all the, and I became aware of the fact he knew this person because they ate meals together and they interacted. And I thought, what a loss. You don't get to share resources. in terms of knowledge and mentorship or anything else when you separate people by generation.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Yeah, a lot of these.
Just wanted to unmute myself for a minute. Oh, sorry.
No,
Hopefully
go
my
ahead,
connection stays strong. I haven't personally experienced ageism in the sense we're talking about it, but I see it a lot in our world. I strongly have the opposite experience that people come to my door and ask if my father's home, and it's my house and my kids, but people see me in the opposite light all the time. And that's incredibly frustrating. But I was reflecting on how our workplace probably has its own issues in this realm, but we all really go on experience based, and our teams have all ages. And I didn't realize quite how unique that may be.
There's a lot of great work being done on the value of intergenerational teams. We talk a lot about interdisciplinary teams. I think there's also, diverse teams includes age, and making sure we're getting perspectives from all different ages is a great thing.
If they have another moment, this question reminded me, I'd watched a short video on Instagram this week that showed essentially acting out two different scenarios of getting someone in residential care out of bed in the morning. And so then the first version of this acting is more of the rough, like, okay, we just got to get you out and we'll get you up. And then of course the person in the bed is resisting because they were just woken up out of sleep. And, then there's all these, things going on that went negatively. And then the second version of this is, how do I approach this older adult? And I think when you ask this question about what does it look like without ageism, I think it's just recognizing that we're people. And I think, we have this common humanity together. And so I think it's recognizing how you can approach people and treat people that are different from you. So whether that's age, race, etc. And it was very much not at all what they were talking about in the video, but to me, it resonated so well with this question.
That's a great point, and also goes into what we're going to be talking about next too. Great. Okay, I think we got.
I love the comments about mutual respect.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of really, really great ideas. And Caitlin, you're sharing that story reminded me of another example that I like to share, and that was related to COVID and the boomer remover movement and just all of the negative things that were going on related to that. And why should we give older adults vaccines? Because they're just going to die anyways. And there was a prominent individual in Texas that said that older adults were willing to die to help save younger people and give them vaccines over themselves. There's just so many ways that we see ageism playing out in a variety of ways.
Okay, do you want to take us to the next slide? So as we mentioned this has come up, and again, just reiterating the fact also that we're focused on older adults, but ageism, again, goes both ways, and this impacts younger adults, older adults, middle-aged adults, everyone. But talking about the effects of ageism, if we focused on facts rather than myths and stereotypes and that implicit ageism biases that we have, obviously we would learn more from each other, but unfortunately there continues to be many negative consequences of ageism. And the first one I have listed here is that ageism really restricts our empathy. So just as, and I think it was Eleanor, is that mentioned about the church. What happens when ageism is so pervasive is that age groups tend to become othered. So older adults become others. Again, we don't interact with each other. We don't relate to each other. They almost feel, we just feel like we can't relate or have empathy for groups of others. So in the case of ageism, older adults, or on the other side, younger adults. And as it has been mentioned already, when we see other people, when we see people as others, it really limits our ability to see them as individuals with needs and rights themselves. Elder abuse is a prime example of that. The older adults can be marginalized. They often become isolated. COVID-19 has been a huge example of that isolation and the impacts of that. Many times older adults don't report abuse because they don't think anyone will respond. We don't see it as an important issue. So there's all of this that is built into losing that empathy for others when ageism is pervasive. The next effect of ageism is longevity. So there's some really interesting research out there on our own perceptions of aging and how that can affect even how long we live. Of course, among other factors, but when we have positive perceptions about aging, you live longer. There's something I've read that says even something like 5 years of a longer life when you have a positive perception on aging. And so we know that when we internalize that ageism, it has real effects on our health and well-being and our longevity. And just as a personal example, I've always, my spouse and I are very opposite ends of the spectrum when we celebrate birthdays. He doesn't want to acknowledge his birthday. Let's ignore it. Don't want to, acknowledge the fact that I'm getting older. Whereas I've always tried to, age is a privilege. And so I celebrate every birthday that comes along and every day. So again, that internalized ageism can have a big effect on our health and well-being. So we've kind of covered a little bit of this, but ageism also politicizes aging. I'm sure many of you here remember the term. It was fairly common for a while there, the gray tsunami that was coming. This was used on news channels and in reports on this changing population of older adults. And it really became this thing to fear. This overwhelming group of older adults is going to take over the country and our resources, and they're going to need care. And obviously, there is truth to the changing aging population. However, a lot of this kind of fear-based reporting on this gray tsunami was exaggerated and based on stereotypes. So we know that this, not only are a lot of these issues exaggerated, but we also know even with the population changes that this bubble of older adult, kind of the growing aging population will eventually, those age groups will even out again. So it's not this doom and gloom that everyone was reporting for so long. And then finally, intergenerational conflicts. Again, when we start to other ourselves from groups of people, we get pitted against each other. And this is a good example of this is younger adults and older adults. Erin mentioned that in my head, I hear the boomer versus the millennials, right? You're negative statements about boomers and you hear negative statements about millennials and the younger generations, and it's really pitting us against each other. And in reality, we all have contributions to make We all have perspectives, and we are better when we're working together, as many of our examples, as all of you have shared. And so even kind of bringing it back to the workforce, there's a lot of stereotypes, again, as Erin mentioned, that older adults, if they don't retire, they're taking jobs away from younger adults, or they're kind of on the, same spectrum, double-edged sword, is if they do retire, then they're draining resources through Social Security, Medicare. So there's really a no-win situation for older adults often as they get older. But in reality, we know that older adults continue to contribute to our society in a variety of ways, whether that's continuing in the workforce, caring for younger generations, being involved in volunteer work. There's just so much ways that they continue to contribute. And ageism just continues this intergenerational conflict. And let's see, I'm reading the clarifying, ageism exacerbates other disadvantages. So like many of the other isms and so if we talk about intersectionality of, I think the point it's making here is that, gender, race, socioeconomic status, when we add age into that for older adults, it continues to just increase those disparities, whether it's health disparities, disadvantages, because of those social determinants of health, including when we talk about age too. But ultimately, ageism continues, and other isms just continue to really divert attention from creating a more fair and just society for everyone. Okay, so now that we've kind of covered those effects, we would like to just chat about how might we, whether that's as individuals, thinking back to those different levels of ageism that Erin talked about, how might we work to help combat ageism as individuals, in our relationships, in the workforce? What ideas or examples do you have that you would like to share about how to combat ageism? And these could even be, like I said, examples of, if you are in a workplace that really values all different perspectives and kind of what that looks like for your workplace, and share those with us too. Being an advocate and speaking up for older people and spending time with them. Huh?
Amy, I would say that I have been, I have participated in ageism when I was a younger worker. Now that I'm older, I can totally see how it affects people. But as a younger worker, I was thinking these people seem so much older than me. So, like, why are you still working? Why don't you retire and, enjoy the rest of your life? So I think just even being aware of what ageism is and how it affects people. Same way with honey and sweetie and dearie. I say that a lot. People, when I'm talking to them, not as a, like a cutesy way, like you're a child, but just, that's just something that I have in my vocabulary, but just recognizing and being aware, more aware of how these words and these thoughts affect people is very helpful.
Great, thank you. And I think that awareness, just kind of going off that awareness point, is really important. I know we're in an academic institution, and we have more and more non-traditional students. I was a non-traditional student myself. I was significantly older than most of my peers and was treated very differently. And having experienced that myself, I see it more, but sometimes we don't have those experiences. So really being aware of it and helping others become more aware of it as well. Let's see, asking what we can do to help, what topics they'd like to learn about, talking to them and not about them. Let's see, taking care of yourself, aging gracefully. Oh, there's ethical hiring practices, recognizing what questions are not allowed to be asked in job interviews. That's a great point. I show my students in one of our gerontology classes, they actually did a study where they tracked where on a resume the hiring individuals were paying most attention to. And it was all of the information. It was basically the information that tells you, even though they're not allowed to ask how old you are, that helps you figure out how old someone is. It's like their education years or, yeah, anyways, it's pretty interesting when you get down into the nitty gritty of that. Respecting each other's experiences, all experiences lead to wisdom and better understanding. And talking to older colleagues, asking them for help. And these are great. And I mean, a lot of these are getting at just that idea of inclusion and, working together. I think that's a big point for the workplace, is to avoid this kind of othering that we do for many different reasons, but including because of age, and recognizing the value of what everyone can bring to the table and every voice has to share. Okay, so these are, we'll continue kind of just for a few more minutes as we wrap up talking about these. Just as a list on the next slide, we do have a few more. A lot of these came up in the discussion or in the chat. But again, awareness, educating ourselves, helping to educate others, being that advocate for older adults and looking to bring about change. If there's something that you see as an issue related to ageism in your workplace, maybe not just sit back, maybe do something to help bring about change for you, your colleagues, whoever that might be. And then raising awareness, helping to dispel myths, encouraging intergenerational groups and programs. We do a lot of us in the Center on Aging do work with intergenerational groups. And I can't tell you how much learning opportunities and enjoyment comes from a very concentrated effort in connecting older adults with younger adults and children, and these intergenerational programs can be really combat ageism in and of themselves, and change views and perspectives about older adults when we get younger adults and children connected to older adults. Changing the way you see aging. Again, that implicit biases and our own perspectives on aging can have a huge impact on how we view other older adults or older adults in general. So kind of changing your own views about aging and really internalizing positive messages about aging. And this goes to that implicit biases and trying to overcome some of those stereotypes or societal myths or pressures that we have around how we view aging in older adults. So to kind of conclude, I present this as a question, but really also as a challenge. You can kind of think about it yourself. You can post this in the chat or speak up, but what is one very concrete action step that you could take to examine your own implicit ageist beliefs and maybe make change if you see something that needs to change? That's something you can do, an action step. I'll start just by sharing an example. So I'm actually new to Kansas, in Kansas State, and I made a very explicit effort when we moved here. Normally, when we move somewhere new, I look for neighbors that are around my age with kids my age, and I reach out to them. I know we're likely going to be interacting a lot. And when we moved here, I made a very explicit effort to get to know all my neighbors, including those that are much younger, much older. And I've really enjoyed getting to know all of my neighbors. But it took a lot of effort. I will admit that, but that's one thing I did. Others of you have said, stop and think about how I would want to be treated. It's a great point. Try to put myself in their shoes. One thing that I often tell my students and think about myself too is aging and ageism, we're all aging. If we're not aging, the alternative is unfortunate. So we're all likely going to be an older adult, or we're there already. And so this will impact all of us. So that's thinking about how we would like to be treated when we get to that point is a great way to do that. Checking thoughts before saying something out loud to someone else. Treating others how they want to be treated. Yep. I think really, how to answer politely when someone asks when you're going to retire. Yeah, there's lots of different educational resources on aging. If we're all, I think most of us, since we're here, are doing the work to support and promote the health and well-being of older adults. So continuing that work. Great. Okay, well, Erin, do you want to add anything as we wrap up here?
I don't think so as far as content, but we would love to hear from you in the future. If you want to learn more about ageism, we have a lot of great conversation and resources on that. And so we would love to interact with you. And if you want to learn more about it for another webinar, we would be glad to do that. This was a really sort of quick overview and conversation about that. We are so excited about the number of you who are able to join us today. So we do have a survey that the North Central Region Aging Network does for each of our webinars, and we would very much appreciate if you would fill that out. It's really quick and easy. Let's see. References about why older adults retire and leave the workforce and why they stay. Yeah, so a quick thought with that. So what we can do, the next email that we send out with the link to the latest webinar at the bottom, we can put some more resources in that. So folks can all, so you all can get that and explore some additional readings. You bet. All right. Well, we've already dropped off several people. So for those of you who are remaining, thank you so much for joining us. And we always want to put a good plug in for K-State. And we offer online graduate certificates in gerontology and an online master's. And if you're ever interested in learning more about gerontology or what we have to offer, of course, please get in touch with us and let us know. But we're so excited that you joined us today, and we hope that you will get on for the next webinar next month. And we will stick around for a minute if anyone wants to ask questions.
Are you seeing other extension programs promoting, I don't know, just awareness about ageism? Are you seeing like programs for the public audiences? I'm just curious what you've heard has been going on, maybe in extension land, if you've heard from other states or from your own colleagues. What kind of programs are they doing to address awareness in ageism?
Mm-hmm. So to be blunt and honest, I think people talk about it and say that they're really trying to address the issue, but I'm not sure how directly it is actually being addressed. So I do know our group, the North Central Region Aging Network, is we've been pulling together some folks to do a training. Amy, what is it called? Now I'm blanking.
Is it the, it's basically like language. Is that the one you kind of reframing aging? So it's really kind of changing the narrative about how we talk about aging and the language that we use. I think that's the one you're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. So with that, we've been trying to get some more folks involved just in that more specific and very in-depth training on ageism and reframing aging. So I know we're starting to personally try and implement some more initiatives. We did an internal, like I mentioned at the beginning, we did an internal webinar for K-State trying to start more conversation here at our university. But yeah, as far as specific things, I'm not really aware of any work that's being done to a large degree, at least.
And that doesn't really surprise me. I know for me, I'm Illinois Extension, I'm nutrition, so this is not my wheelhouse, but I do a lot of programs with older adults, and so this is something that I wanted to sit in on. But I mean, I'm just thinking of my perspective as a younger adult, where I'm watching my parents age, and it's my own internal fears, right? Of, okay, I'm gonna have to take care of them, or am I going to be like this when I'm old? So I wonder if some of that ageism is also younger people putting fears out there, which is probably maybe more of a psychology question, but but no, this was really interesting. I appreciate the content.
I'm gonna really quickly, I do know that it's not organization. It's based in Colorado. So I actually just moved here from Colorado. There's a reframing aging initiative, and they're trying to get webinars and trainings out to, they're kind of utilizing universities. I think they've even done a few through Colorado Extension on this idea of reframing aging and kind of trying to take away some of those fears, educating people about I mean, there's a lot of different topics, but like one of the big ones right now is ageism in healthcare. So I think there's work out there. There's a lot of work to be done.
For sure. And I saw one of our family life colleagues in Illinois who's on this webinar too. So I'm sure she would be my go-to source for local things. But I was just curious if you had heard nationally anything that's going on. So that's just my own curiosity. All right, ladies, I'm going to jump off, but thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.